All right, so today we're going to talk about culling your herd. It's one of those decisions that ultimately everybody has to make to help strengthen your herd for the future. All right. The question you should be asking yourself when you're deciding who gets to stay and who has to leave your operations is ultimately how many pounds of beef has she raised? Because that's what she's doing. Her job is to raise you pounds of beef in the form of a calf. Not only are you looking at how much she's raised, but you're going to look at how that calf compares to its peers. Has she done as good of a job as her peers, or is she lacking? The three things we're going to cover today is when, the ideal time you should be making these decisions, why you are making this decision to cull them or to keep them, and ultimately what you're looking for. You're looking at the cow and you're looking at the calf. So you're looking at the producer and the product. When? So ideally, you're able to make these culling decisions after weaning, within the first couple days. She no longer has a calf by her side. She's in what we call the maintenance period. So she's just holding steady. She's not in lactation anymore. Her nutritional needs are a little bit lower than she would be when she's lactating. And you don't have to worry about additional labor or feeding for an early weaned calf. Unfortunately, sometimes early weaning happens. Now, this is an example that I can take directly from my current situation on my family's farm. We've had to early wean. The reasons why, so the one individual, it's a steer, he's standing, he was weaned early because his mom died. We're still waiting on results from the vet, but it's pretty inconclusive. She was a little bit older, but we ultimately don't know why. The one laying down, we actually chose to wean early. And we did that because she's actually injured. She doesn't get around very well. She's got a little bit mobility issue in her back end. So we chose to early wean her so that way that steer calf wasn't alone inside. We have the facilities on my parents' place to do this. Not every farm does. So if you don't want to early wean or you can't early wean, that's all right. Why? Was she able to do her job is the question you need to ask yourself. You are running a business. Businesses come with tough decisions. Now, in no order of importance, we're going to talk about age, injury or illness, disposition, maternal ability, and reproductive status. Again, it depends on the animal and the situation, how these areas are of importance to you and to your operation. When we look at age, you need to consider that your older cows are more prone to injury. It's harder to maintain body condition the older they get, and they tend to have more issues with their udder. As time goes on, the ligaments tend to stretch, resulting in udder issues. Younger cows, on the other hand, do have their own set of problems. Sometimes they can pull off their condition too much and get too thin with that first calf, which will hold them back for subsequent rebreedings in the future. So these are things to consider when you look at age. Now, injury and illness. Again, this is another example from my current situation here in Wisconsin. We had 94. She actually stifled back in July and hurt herself. So she's been losing some condition. She still gets around okay mobility-wise, but she does have an injury, so she will be leaving the farm. What's important about injuries and illnesses is that these animals are doing a job for you. And with that job comes an inherent respect from you. Do not let things get too far for that animal, that they're too injured or too ill to have a proper end to their life. Okay, so don't let things get advanced too far where they get too injured to move or they're too ill to leave your farm. Disposition. There's no reason to keep an animal on your farm who's dangerous. No matter how good of a calf she raises, no matter how fast she breeds back, there will be ultimately a time where she's going to hurt you, someone in your family, or other animals on your farm. And you don't need that expense, and you don't need that headache. Life is just too short for dangerous cows. So if they have a bad disposition, ultimately, they really need to leave your farm. Maternal ability. So again, I use a lot of examples from my farm, which I'm currently at right now. This one is a cow-calf pair that we have. He's one of our best calves right now. The goal is to have really good calves, and I'm sure you all know that. When we look at the maternal ability, we want to know how her calf compares to her herd mates. So the herd mates of that animal are the ones that are born approximately the same time as that animal and are the same gender. So make sure that you're not comparing animals that were born last with those compared first. We also want to know if she has issues with dystocia. Did she have a hard pull? Does she always have hard pulls? Does she always have complications that way? Does she uterine prolapse? Generally speaking, if they prolapse once, they'll continue to do it every time they breed. That is one you do not want to keep in your farm. Does she have a small frame size that even a calving ease bull causes problems for her? That's not something you want in your herd. You don't want to keep that line of genetics. Also, a problem that we have here on our farm, we have a cow, and I have no idea why. Every calf she has doesn't know how to drink. We have to spend time every time she calves to teach this calf how to drink. Since she's had twins 3 years in a row, she's gotten to stay around because she gives us twins. But that's a burden that we chose to take on as a farm. If that doesn't work for you, that's an animal that you put on your call list. Reproductive status. Obviously, any open cows you have should go. The only disclaimer I have on that is sometimes I like to keep first calf heifers who got a little thin and didn't rebreed. Give her a little bit of a gap, perhaps have her calve in the fall, or hold her over for a year and give her a chance to bounce back. That's my philosophy. It's not everybody's philosophy. Difficult breeders, if you have to fight every year to get her bred, but heck, she raises a good calf, she could be someone on your list. If you don't want to fight with her to breed her every year, she's got to go. And finally, late breeders. She breeds, but every year she breeds a little later, extending out your calving window. So instead of, a nice 60-day calving window, next thing you know, you have a 90-day calving window, and further out and further out. Ultimately, she probably's got to go. Another question I get asked all the time is, but she's bred, I should keep her. Okay. If that same animal produces you a less thrifty calf, what she's doing is she's eating the same amount as your higher performing cows, and she's producing less calf. That is costing you money. I realize she's bred, but you're going to find yourself in the same position you are this year, next year, when she again produces a lower forming calf. She is not going to suddenly change and become a high producer. What happens when you sell this lower performing calf, if you'll look at the chart on this page, is that you will get the average for your whole herd of calves based on the lowest calves. So in this example, the herd weight's average for the calves was 575 pounds. So instead of getting the price of the steers at the 600, 650 range, you drop down to the 550, 600 range. You cost yourself a difference of well over $159 just for one animal. So keeping an animal just because she's bred is not always the right decision to make. Now, finally, what are we looking for? So I've told you why we're going to do things. I've told you when you should do things, but ultimately, what should you be looking at with these animals when you're making this decision? With the cows, We look at body condition, we look at her udder, and we look at her feet and legs, just a couple areas. With the calf, again, we're comparing its size and weight and overall structure. We don't want to keep any animals that might lead to more genetic fetal anomalies. So when we look at body condition at weaning, we're going to have a couple groups of cows. You're going to have your thin ones, your moderate ones, and your heavy ones. Right now, we're going to focus on our outliers, our thin and our heavy. Why are they thin? Some reasons why is that they put everything into that production of that calf. This happens a lot with your high milking producers. This happens with some of your young animals. But the goal is to make sure that she doesn't fall below a body condition at 4 at weaning. If she's starting to lose too much weight, unfortunately, this is a time where you're going to have to wean early for her sake, because you want her to maintain that pregnancy that she should be carrying to produce another calf. She could also be thin because of age. As I said before, first calf heifers and older cows do have a hard time of maintaining condition while simultaneously lactating. And then finally, injury or illness can lead to degradation of body condition. Why are they heavy? Ultimately, they're heavy because they were poor milkers and they put weight on their back instead of weight in their calf. You want to keep an eye on cows that are a body condition score of 6 or higher at weaning. That means they're just not milking like they should have. To further illustrate that, these great examples from Jeff, thank you for sharing these pictures with me, is we want to remember you're going to be focusing on the outliers when it comes to body condition. Anything under a 4 and anything over a 6. One of the most important things that your cow will have for you is the udder. That is how she's helping you produce pounds of beef in her calf. It is essential that you evaluate that udder, and one of the best times to do it is at weaning, because you've chose to wean her in theory and she hasn't weaned herself. So the first couple days post weaning, she should have a swollen udder, and it should be easy visible to see that she's producing milk still. Why this matters is ultimately you can determine if all 4 quarters are full, or if you have one where she's dried up one of her quarters, or she might not have a functioning 4th quarter, or she may be down to 2 quarters. Has she dried herself off early? Is she a poor producer? For example, in this picture that I'm sharing below, remember the one that we weaned early because the calf was injured? That is her mother with the more of a dirty back end because she was inside. And she just couldn't stay clean. She was 3 days post weaning, and if you'll notice, she's next to a cow that's still in milk production, and her udder is not that different. What that tells us is, though she's a 2-year-old, she really started to dry herself off really quick, which means she probably wasn't a very good producer. Now we're sitting there trying to decide right now whether she's going to get to stay another year or if this was her last year on the farm. Another thing you want to look at is the overall teat length and shape. It's preferred that they're short teats versus long, and try to avoid any animals that have an enlarged or funnel-shaped teat, as you'll see on the picture of that cow. It's one of our neighbors. That shape indicates that there was a potential infection and teat damage, or the muscle tissue just kind of blown out. It's not a good shape for calves. It's hard for them to nurse, particularly newborns. That's not a kind of shape on an udder you want. And finally, one thing we like to look at, as I mentioned before, is the ligaments. Shorter udders that are tighter to the body have tighter, stronger ligaments. Again, if you look at the picture below, it's a bit of an older cow on the left where her udder's hanging lower versus the one on the right where the udder is shorter and tighter. We prefer the right to the left. One other thing we look at is the feet and legs. Ultimately, if she has a mobility issue, she's going to have lower feed intake. Lower feed intake is directly related to lower milk production. And again, when you have decreased milk production, you cannot expect good calf performance. So please keep an eye on the feet and legs of your cows. They are the foundation of good cows. Finally, when we're looking at calves, we want to compare them to their age group peers. Again, you want to keep in mind how old the mom is. Mature cows or older cows tend to wean out heavier calves. And gender, steers tend to be heavier than heifers. In this picture, we have several calves. The one in the middle, 94Y, is actually the oldest one in that group by 3 weeks. As you'll see, he's a bit smaller than his peers. Ultimately, that can probably be traced back to his mother, who is the one who stifled. So she is starting to have a bit of mobility issues. So what we've done is we've brought her inside with her calf in order to supplement her directly to get her milk production up a little bit higher before we have to wean that calf at the end of the month. We also like to look at structure. Now, I'm not asking you all to become livestock judges, but you know a good calf when you see it. Does that calf stand solid on all 4 legs? So it kind of has a shape of a box when you look at it, nice and square. Is it straight through the spine? So does it have a hunched back, or what we call a roach back? Does it have a bit of a dip in the back or a bit of a sway back? These are things to notice about the calves. It's not so crucial when you're looking at feedlot calves, and these calves you're going to sell as feeders, but ultimately when you're raising replacement females, there are certain things you want in your herd and certain things you don't. Structurally incorrect calves you don't want. So ultimately, when you make these culling decisions, you are determining the future success of your cattle business, because it is indeed a business. And you want to make the calls that are right for your farm. These are just a few strategies to help you make those decisions.